the money.
That's what I always say. You always follow the money.
Yeah.
This is Follow the Money with Mitch Moss and Pauly Howard, live from the DraftKings Sportsbook in Foxwoods Resort and Casino on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Back here on the program, it is Follow the Money on VSiN, the sports betting network, as we are live this week at Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut. And the reason why we are here is because there's a brand new spanking sportsbook opening up. It's the DraftKings Sportsbook here at Foxwoods, and Jason Robbins is the CEO of DraftKings, and he's kind enough to join us here on the set today. Good to meet you. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Congratulations on all of this. What a setup.
Amazing. I mean, I used to come to Foxwoods when I first moved to Boston almost 20 years ago. I came here all the time, probably close to every weekend for a little while, and never thought I'd see something like this. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Can we start, and we're going to get to a lot with you, but can you take us back to the very beginning of DraftKings, because it was you, Matt Kalish, others at the very beginning stages of DraftKings, and you were all working, I believe, at Vistaprint at the time. So what is that like? The ideas are flowing. What can we do? We have an idea, and all of a sudden something like pops, daily fantasy. Like, what happened, and how did you guys make it take off?
Well, the idea, I can't take credit, it was Matt's. Matt and I had known each other for years. We worked together. I'd worked with Paul for years, and we'd all always kind of batted around different ideas, probably dozens of terrible ideas. Nothing really stuck, and we just all had the itch to start something together. And one day Matt, grabs me and says, "Hey, I think I got it." And he told me the basic idea for DraftKings, and I thought about it for about 10 seconds, and I was like, I think this is it. And then I went home that night, and I just kept thinking about it and thinking about it. I could barely sleep, and then the next morning I called him up, and I said, we got to do this. This is a great idea. I love it.
And then when you started to, how long did it take before, that pitch eventually to the right people to make it happen? Did people, grab onto it, right away like you did?
No, what happened was we started to work with Paul and Matt, Paul and Matt, in the spare bedroom of Paul's house in Watertown, Massachusetts. We just had a bunch of whiteboards up, some cheap desks with laptops on them, and we'd go there every night after work. We'd leave work around 7:30, sometimes a little later, and we'd order pizzas. Back then I could get away with eating pizza all the time. I can't anymore. And we just work through the night till about 12, 1 o'clock, go back, sleep, get up in the morning, go to our day jobs, repeat. On Saturdays and Sundays, we get up around 6, 7 a.m., go to his house, and we were able to get 30, 40 hours a week in doing that. And we made some progress. We built a prototype, but really just felt like we weren't going to get anywhere without putting some money in. So we all pulled together $25,000 in cash. It was at the time, a ton of money to us. And we said, well, we probably don't want to just put it in my bank account. We might as well open up a corporate account. But wait, we don't have a company. So we found a lawyer and said, hey, just, whole point was, can you help us set up a company? A guy named John Hession, great guy. And he said, listen, we can do that, but I really think you guys ought to try to raise some outside money. That's not going to be enough. You got to be able to have some money so you can do this full time. You're going to need to work harder. You're going to need to have more hours. You're going to need to run faster. And so went out, pitched probably about 50, 60 investors, got tons of no's, and finally found a guy named Ryan Moore, and he was a believer. He's a big fantasy football fan himself, and he put some money in. We were able to scrounge together a little bit more for a total of $1.4 million, and from there we just kind of got to work, and lots happened since then.
I would say so.
Yeah. How's the relationship and the friendship? Has it changed at all with now you've become big and successful?
I think we're closer than ever.
Wow, really?
Yeah, you know what? It's rare to see that the lawyer I mentioned earlier, John Hession, he's a quirky guy. He would always be trying to teach us lessons, and he would do this thing where he loved the greasy diners. So we'd meet and a Saturday morning, 7 a.m. at a diner, and the deal was as long as we picked up the check, it was usually like $20. He would give us free legal advice for an hour or two. One day we all walked in. He has this real serious look on his face, and he's usually a joker. So I was like, oh, something bad happened? He goes, I have something important to tell you guys. Sit down. We're like, okay. He goes, I want you all to look at each other. We're like, okay. We look at each other. He's like, I want you to look at each other again. I was like, all right, John, where are you going with this? He goes, in 5 years' time, maybe 3, at least one of you will not be here. And I was like, why are you saying that? He goes, that's the story of all founders. That's how it happens. You need to be prepared for that. You need to go into that. And I saw him not too long ago, and I said, John, do you remember when you did that? And he said, yeah. He said, guess what? We're all still here.
Wow.
That was about 11 years ago. So pretty. I remember that so well, and I couldn't wait to tell him 10, 11 years later that we bucked the trend. It's very rare to have 3 founders that are still this involved with the company. And if you look at a lot of the great companies, Google it was 2 founders, but they were both very involved for a long time. It's Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Those are some of the best companies that get built when you have 2 founders or 3 or whatever it is that all stay involved, because nobody cares more than the founder.
Let's follow the money on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. DraftKings CEO Jason Robbins, our guest. So when PASPA was repealed a handful of years ago, did you guys know, way in advance of then, that you were going to say, once this happens, if it happens, we're going to go from daily fantasy to expanding to sportsbooks like this? We got to do it?
Absolutely, because the history there was a couple years before that, we had started to have a merger discussion with FanDuel. This is when both companies were just doing daily fantasy. We got the deal done, only to have it challenged by the FTC, on the basis of antitrust. And about, 3 days, maybe a week after that happened, and we're trying to figure out what we do. Do we go to court and try to fight it? Usually don't win those things. What do we do? About a week, maybe less after, we got the news that the Supreme Court had granted cert. They were taking up the New Jersey sports betting case. No one expected that to happen because New Jersey had lost, I think, 7 times along the way in the different circuits. Right. So big surprise, and it was almost like this message down from above kind of thing for me, all right, this is the next thing we need to do. So I went back to Matt and Paul and the rest of the team, and I said, you know what, here's what I think we should do. We should put this merger aside. Didn't happen. Let's go all in on building a sports book. Let's make sure that we figure this thing out. And so from there, and this was a little, I think, under a year from when it ultimately got overturned by the Supreme Court, it was all hands on deck. We shifted a ton of our resources. I mean, we really made a big bet, and we didn't know if the Supreme Court was ultimately going to rule in favor. We just knew that it was too big an opportunity to pass up. And that's why we were able to be the first one to launch in New Jersey. We had been preparing for almost a year at that point, and or actually about a year, because after the Supreme Court ultimately overturned it, there were a couple months before New Jersey launched. And we were surprised because there were a lot of companies that were already doing iGaming in New Jersey, so already licensed for online there. A lot of these companies also had online sports books in other parts of the world, including Nevada. So we thought we were really playing from behind here. We were very surprised when we were actually able to be the first ones to get out of the gate. And I think it's a testament to the team. Paul actually literally predicted the day it was going to launch almost a year in advance, which is pretty remarkable. Yeah, he'd hit the nail on. I sometimes think he maybe waited a couple extra days just so he could hit it, but he'll say it just was a coincidence. He's good at that, though. Most tech people, most product people always miss deadlines. He never misses a deadline.
Okay, so let's fast forward, and then a couple of weeks ago, we have to ask you about the comments that you made that took off. They made headlines, made some news. When you said, the quote was, this is an entertainment activity. People who are doing this for profit are not the players we want. Can you explain that a little bit further here on VSiN's airwaves?
Well, I think probably I could have chosen my words better. It was also taken a lot of context. What I had said, and I clarified this on CNBC, is we don't want professionals. And by professionals, I think this is very important. We don't mean people who win. Lots of people win. It's great when people win. We don't ban people from winning. We don't limit people from winning. What we don't want are the Billy Walters types who are throwing money on one side to try to manipulate the lines and move them one way and messing around with the ecosystem. That's not good for anybody. That's not good for the bettors. It's not good for the operators. We don't want people who are, setting up operations and trying to do things to manipulate the ecosystem. And that's really what I meant when I said we don't want professionals. Absolutely, we want people winning. Being a professional who's doing things like that is very different than somebody who's winning. Somebody who's winning just because they're good, that's great. All day long, we like those customers because part of the whole appeal of the product is to win. If you can't win, or if you think that if you start winning, you're not going to be allowed to play anymore, what's the point? And I'm somebody that grew up betting on sports, playing poker, all those things. And I always felt like it was important that I had this idea that I could win. There were times where I won for years. There were times where I had losing streaks. So I totally empathize with and understand the bettor mentality. And I'm sorry that what I said was maybe, I didn't choose the perfect words. And I think some of it was taken a little bit out of context too, which happens. You say things and they turn into sound bites. But I just want to clarify that's absolutely not what I meant. What I meant was we don't want guys like Billy Walters, which, I think ultimately is bad for the whole ecosystem. Nothing against Billy. He's a smart guy and he has a right to try to do that. But I also understand why any operator would say, listen, If you're trying to manipulate lines and things like that, that's not really in the spirit of a fair competition. We want people to come in and you beat the house, you beat it fair and square, that's fine. It's no different to me than I was talking the other day about people manipulating our stock and things like that. I hate that too, when people are like, short selling and dumping shares only, so their other hedge fund buddies can try to buy it back at a cheaper price, things like that. That's not really how it's meant to work. If people want to make a bet in the stock market, no pun intended, and buy it at a fair price and they think this is, a good deal, fine. What I don't like is when people are manipulating things. I think that that's not in the spirit of the game, and it's not in the spirit of the stock market either.
What would your advice be to potential investors?
Well, I can never predict what's going to happen in the short term. I can't even really predict what's going to happen in the long term. There are a lot of factors that play in. But what I will say is I am very confident in the strategy we have. I'm very confident in the team. I'm very confident in the roadmap and the things that we have planned. And I really, truly believe that those are going to create a lot of value. I'm pretty invested myself. I still have about 90% of my net worth in DraftKings. And so, I'm a believer. It's always hard to tell. There's different factors, a lot of which have nothing to do with, an individual company that drive markets up and down. Amazon was $105 in 1999, dropped down to a little over $5 not too much longer. Now it's a $3,000 plus stock. Their strategy, though, they stuck with. They did the same things. I'm sure they iterated and learned along the way. But if you have conviction in your strategy, I think the best thing to do is to stay with it. And ultimately, I think the results get there and the market catches on.
Okay, very good. Congratulations on the opening here at Foxwoods.
Pretty exciting. Thank you. I'm so glad you guys were able to come check it out. Thank you.
This is great. Thanks so much for having us. And continued success.